As crazy as that sounds, the fight actually kind of went as I expected. For those of you guys that missed it, Derrick Lewis and Jailton Almeida, they faced off, and I was actually very excited for this main event. I thought that a lot of people were writing off Derrick Lewis, and there was a reason why I picked Jailton Almeida, which we're going to get into a second. But this is a performance that I think needs to be talked about a lot, because while, although, let's be honest, nobody had exactly a great showcase, I think it said a lot about both of these guys, the potential of Jailton Almeida, and some of the mistakes that he made that I think he will fix in the future, as well as Derrick Lewis, what changes that he has made in his game, because a lot of people aren't talking about the fact that Derrick Lewis did pretty well, considering that this is a guy that got submitted by Sergey Spivak in the beginning of the year by arm triangle, and had that threatened multiple times in this fight, and he was not close to getting subbed at all. The guy didn't give up, and we're going to talk about all that in a second. But first, I want to remind you guys to hit the subscribe button, like, comment, and share. We're trying to 20K by the end of the year. You guys are the best fan base in MMA, so I know you guys are going to help me with that goal. And yeah, I wanted to talk about the main event. So guys, obviously UFC Sao Paulo was last past week, and the main event was supposed to be Jailton Almeida versus Curtis Blaydes, and I was excited for that main event. However, it obviously fell through. Curtis Blaydes had a pullout with some sort of injury. I hope they might rebook that matchup. I'll talk about that near the end of the video, of course, when we're talking about what's next for these guys. But I had said to you guys, I said, listen, I thought that, yes, Jailton Almeida was going to win. I picked him by second round TKO. I told you guys, look, I don't think he's going to have an easy way with Derrick Lewis, and I said what everybody is now saying. I said that the ground game of Jailton Almeida is a little overrated. I told you guys, the guy really just uses basic jiu-jitsu fundamentals, and I feel like not a lot of people that cover MMA, especially guys like online or, you know, non-fighters, I mean, they don't really cover the grappling aspect of things, right? They definitely overlook it. I'm not pretending to be some sort of high-level grappler, but people look at Jailton Almeida, you know, steamrolling these heavyweights, and they just don't realize that a lot of these heavyweights can't grapple. And let's be honest, Derrick Lewis isn't exactly a great grappler either, but I still predicted that he was going to be able to do decent. I didn't think that Jailton Almeida was going to be able to submit him, because I felt like being a purple belt, I felt like he would just have enough to defend himself, and plus the size advantage Derrick Lewis had. I mean, he was 265, maxing out the heavyweight limit, while Jailton Almeida weighed in at like 230 or something like that. I mean, the guy is very small. Maybe he could even be a light heavyweight. But regardless, I had picked a Jailton Almeida, but I did tell you guys, I said, look, I would not be surprised to see a Derrick Lewis win here, so much so I even bet on Derrick Lewis. And to say that Derrick Lewis had some moments, well, that would be a lie. However, we knew that Derrick Lewis wasn't going to win this fight by winning any rounds. We knew if he was going to win, it was going to be by that knockout shot, which was almost there a couple of times. There were a few times where Derrick Lewis was easily able to reverse the position and get some ground and pound from the top off on Jailton Almeida, and a few situations where I kind of worried for Jailton, because listen, Derrick Lewis has had finishes like this in the past where he's on top, ground and pound, and that just speaks to the power of Derrick Lewis. And something that I wish I would have touched on in my video, which I wanted to talk about but I just forgot, the ground and pound skills of Derrick Lewis is severely underrated. That's why when there was talks of Ngannou versus Derrick Lewis too, when, you know, Ngannou was the champ of the UFC, I actually thought that Derrick Lewis could do well in a matchup. I thought that potentially he could use his wrestling and use some of that ground and pound. Now obviously this is in hindsight. Now we know, Ngannou did wrestle Cyril Gane, so we knew that, you know, this guy is going to be some dummy on the ground. But back then, I mean, all he did was really sprawl a takedown against Stipe. But now we've seen Derrick Lewis sprawl, so now anybody could sprawl. But how did the fight go? I think the fight went about as I expected. The first round, you know, we saw Derrick Lewis get taken down pretty early. However, we saw that Jailton Almeida really wasn't able to get too much across. You know, we did try a few submission attempts, but I predicted that he might gas out, you know, because during this fight, I mean, both guys were tired. If you look at the fifth round, both guys were tired. And that's because, like I said, Jailton Almeida, he is going against Derrick Lewis, and although Derrick Lewis might look like a bigger guy, you know, he's got the tummy and all that, still underneath all that is a lot of muscle, right? Because you're constantly carrying the body, and he is a lot bigger than Jailton Almeida. So I said, look, this isn't a guy that's going to be able to easily manipulate on the ground and get, you know, a limb here, get his neck here. This is going to be a guy that's hard to submit, especially being a purple belt. So we survived the first round. I thought that the second round was where we were going to see the end, where we were going to see some ground and pound. And I think Jailton Almeida could have very well finished the fight with his ground and pound. I mean, in that fourth round, I believe he really got a lot of good ground and pound across. And even in that fifth round too, I felt like it was really just a mistake, man. You could tell that this guy is a real jiu-jitsu guy. Jiu-jitsu guys don't obviously use their strikes when they're, you know, rolling around in the jiu-jitsu gym. They use their submissions, and that's what I felt like Jailton Almeida was just trying to do without actually throwing any strikes. This is an MMA fight, you know, damage wins the fights. You gotta, you know, get some damage across. And not that Jailton Almeida was really losing the fight at any point, but it was just, I felt like he could have finished the fight, had a really good performance. It just, for some reason, he just wasn't doing anything in the mount. Like, the dude was in full mount, and the referee's clapping at him, telling him to be active, which is laughable. You are in the most dominant grappling position, yet you're not doing anything with it. Like, it's ridiculous. I think he was trying, you know, to wait out Derrick Lewis, wait for him to explode, and maybe get an arm triangle. I felt like the arm bar was there a couple times. I think he should have tried, but he probably didn't want to risk, you know, giving up that position, letting Derrick Lewis go on top of him. But there were a few times I think maybe if he tried it, he could have gotten close to it at least, because Derrick Lewis was always just on one side trying to hip escape, and I felt like if he was fast enough, maybe he could explode into an arm bar, but I don't know. Either way, Derrick Lewis did have some moments points where, you know, we'd reverse a position where he'd sprawl, take down, defend it, and, you know, go wild until he would just get taken down the next second. Look, Derrick Lewis, we knew that the guy wasn't going to win the fight by winning rounds by, you know, strategically waiting out Jailton Almeida. We knew it was going to be maybe one of these scrambles where Jailton Almeida maybe messes up and Derrick Lewis can get up and maybe land a big one. And I also thought potentially Jailton Almeida could have gassed later on in the fight, and maybe we could have saw Derrick Lewis do well being on the bottom, because I honestly thought that Jailton Almeida was using a lot more energy holding Derrick Lewis than Derrick Lewis was being on the bottom, because Derrick Lewis really just hold, kind of sit there, take some deep breaths. They were both tired at the end, don't get me wrong, because of course it's a fight, and honestly the whole fight has been grappling. But I think either way, you gotta respect Derrick Lewis. Good for him for taking the matchup, and I think a lot of people are surprised by Jailton Almeida. I think a lot of people expected him to steamroll Derrick Lewis, which for the record, I said to you guys, I don't think it's going to be that easy. I did think that he'd get some ground and pound across, and I did pick a second round TKO. So I do think that a lot of people aren't giving Derrick Lewis credit and taking a lot away from Jailton Almeida. Look, at the end of the day, the guys took a short notice fight against a power puncher like Derrick Lewis and basically dominated him for all 5 rounds, right? Let's be honest. There was no moment really where Derrick Lewis was winning. A few, you know, maybe he landed a few shots that were blocked, but outside of that, I mean, Jailton Almeida was doing very well. And one last thing I want to talk about the fight before we move on, I want to say, man, Derrick Lewis, I talked a lot of shit in my video. I said, hey, Derrick Lewis has a tendency to quit. Honestly, I'm proud of Derrick Lewis, even as a fan, and maybe that's why I really like this performance. Even though he got dominated and lost every second of the fight, the dude didn't quit. He was there at the last round, trying to get some shots across, defending takedowns. You can see that he improved on his game, and I hope this doesn't deter Derrick Lewis at all, because at the end of the day, he took this on short notice. I thought he did good against a very high-level prospect. I mean, the guy's younger. Derrick Lewis is almost 40 years old. I hope Derrick Lewis doesn't look at this and get deterred and, you know, starts, you know, falling back into the lazy patterns he's had in the past. However, this is a new Derrick Lewis. This is a Derrick Lewis that is 1000% taking his UFC career serious, and I wish that he would have done this earlier. Although, yes, Derrick Lewis got his ass beat for 25 minutes. I still think that Derrick Lewis, even in the beginning of the year, would have gotten submitted in that first round. And I'm not even saying because Jailton Almeida would have outskilled him. There was just so many moments, like the Cyril Gane fight with Derrick Lewis, where he just quit and crumbled up into a ball. That Derrick Lewis, I think, is gone. And that's pretty scary for the heavyweight division, because the guy is a power puncher, and now that he's there the whole fight and working on his cardio, I'm excited to see what he does next. I hope the UFC rewards him for taking this matchup with a good matchup next. Maybe they do Volkov in him too, finally. I've been saying that fight should happen for a long time. Makes sense. They're both strikers, both on the feet. Obviously, the first fight, Volkov was winning 99% of the fight, and then, you know, Derrick Lewis went crazy at the end. So I really wouldn't mind seeing Derrick Lewis versus Alexander Volkov too, perhaps. Maybe he fights the loser of Pavlovich versus Aspinall. Even if it is Pavlovich, him and Pavlovich have fought before, but that is still a very controversial fight. A lot of people think that fight was stopped too early. In my opinion, I think the fight would have been stopped no matter what. It was an early stoppage, but I don't really see Derrick Lewis getting out of that position he was in. He was definitely hurt by Sergey Pavlovich. Maybe they just run him and Tuivasa back, but honestly, Tuivasa has had so many losses now that I think, honestly, Derrick Lewis is kind of more on the up position. But I think a lot of people will look at this and not really give Derrick Lewis any credit, but I'm here to do it, dude. Derrick Lewis has actually changed, and yes, it wasn't a great performance by any stretch of the imagination, but wow, the fact that he stood there for all 5 rounds, did not quit, didn't give him an arm to grab, didn't give him a choke. He could have tapped to a lot of those submissions, dude. A lot of them were really close. He kept fighting off the submissions, man. I'm proud of Derrick Lewis, dude. I cannot stress this enough. And for Jailton Almeida, man. Now, Jailton Almeida, keep in mind, this is another guy that I have hyped up, so I don't think I'm just some Jailton Almeida hater or a Derrick Lewis lover. Since last year, I've been saying Jailton Almeida is a dangerous guy, so this kind of makes me look bad a little bit, this performance. However, luckily for him, there isn't a lot of good grapplers in the heavyweight division. He called out Cyril Gane. I don't want to see that matchup. Cyril Gane, at the end of the day, number 1, he's too high up for him. I think he's the number 1 contender, I believe. But 2, this wasn't a good performance. And 3, also, Cyril Gane matchup. You know, Cyril Gane had a good win against Sergey Spivak. I kind of want to see him against the loser of Pavlovich and Aspinall. My opinion, I think they should rebook Curtis Blades and him, man. I was really curious about that matchup because Curtis Blades has some good wrestling. Even though he didn't shoot against Sergey Pavlovich for some reason, he does have good wrestling, right? We know he has that background. And how will he do in a grappling match against Jailton Almeida, especially after this weekend? For Jailton Almeida, let's be honest, didn't show exactly the best grappling skills of all time. He is still a good grappler, don't get me wrong. I believe he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. But as I said on Friday, I feel like it's one of those things where if Jailton Almeida weighed, you know, 20 pounds less or 30, whatever weight it would be, let's just say it was a middleweight or a welterweight or just a lighter weight class, I feel like his type of grappling skill pound for pound doesn't necessarily cross over. So with that being said, I would like to see that Curtis Blades matchup come out next. Guys, thank you guys for watching. You guys are the best fan base in MMA. Let me know what you guys thought about Derrick Lewis's performance. What do you think about Jailton Almeida's performance? Do you think he's the real deal? Do you think he's not? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.